It was the summer of 2019, and I was 21 years old, spending a few months back at my parents' house. Life felt slow and lazy, the kind of summer where you wake up to birdsong and warm sunlight, with nothing much to do. On one of those mornings, an idea hit me, sudden and unplanned. I decided I'd go camping for the night in the woods behind their property. I'd done it many times before. Those woods were huge, stretching far beyond the point where you could see the roof of the house. Untouched, wild, and without any marked trails, the perfect place to disappear for a while. I packed my usual gear, told my parents my plan, and by 4 p.m., I was stepping into the dense shade of the trees. I hiked for nearly an hour before finding an open patch of ground with enough space for my tent. The grass was soft, the area flat, and the sunlight slanted through the branches in warm orange beams. I set up camp, cleared a spot for a small fire, and lit it. The crackle of the flames and the smell of wood smoke wrapped around me like a blanket. For a while, it was everything I wanted: the peace, the faint hum of cicadas, the sun lowering behind the tree-line. Then I heard it. A voice. It was low, male, and carried in that odd way where you can't quite tell which direction it's coming from. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, maybe wind in the branches, or an animal. But no, it was speech. Muffled, as though the speaker was talking to themselves. I froze, straining to listen. There was no reason for anyone to be out here. No trails. No campsites. No nearby houses beyond my parents'. I figured whoever it was would just pass by, and that would be it. But 5 minutes went by, and the voice stayed, drifting in and out, never coming closer but never going away. My unease grew heavier with each passing second. "Hello?" I called out, my voice louder than I intended. The voice stopped instantly. The woods fell silent. That silence, total and absolute, felt worse than the voice itself. I waited. Nothing. Not a word. I called out again. No answer. A cold unease crept in, the kind that prickles at the back of your neck. With maybe 20 minutes of daylight left, I decided to pack up and move. I wasn't about to spend the night wondering if someone was standing out there, watching. I found another spot after 15 minutes of quick walking. It wasn't ideal, just a cluster of trees with barely enough space for my tent, but it would do. By the time I had camp set up, the last traces of light had gone, and night wrapped itself around the forest. I lit another small fire and sat close to it, roasting marshmallows. It was comforting, the warmth and light pushing back the darkness. Hours passed. The fire burned lower, dimming to a soft glow. That's when I heard the crunch. Dry leaves. Footsteps. Behind me, to the left. I turned, peering into the dark. The sound stopped. "Hello?" I called again, though my voice came out more cautious this time. From my right, not my left, a man stepped into the circle of firelight. I flinched. He smiled as if we were old friends and strolled forward, holding his hands out toward the fire. "Didn't mean to scare you," he said casually, lowering himself to sit beside me. I didn't know what to say. Can I help you?" "I think you're at the wrong campsite." He shook his head slowly. "No." That was it. Just no. The way he said it sent a chill through me. We sat in tense silence. My mind scrambled for something to say, anything to cut through the thick discomfort. Against my better judgment, I blurted out, "Were you the one I heard earlier, talking in the woods near my other campsite?" His eyes stayed on the fire, but his expression shifted, the faint smile gone, his face suddenly flat. "Must have been someone else," he said, voice low and monotone. Before I could respond, a stick cracked in the darkness behind me. The same spot I'd first heard footsteps from. My stomach sank. He wasn't alone. I turned to look toward the sound, then back to him. He was staring straight at me now. His eyes, cold, lifeless, locked onto mine. I couldn't move for a second. Then instinct took over. I bolted. The forest whipped past me, branches clawing at my arms. Behind me, I heard one of them shout something to the other, anger in his tone, followed by the pounding of footsteps. They were chasing me. I pushed deeper into the woods, using memory from years of exploring these trees to find my way toward the road. The darkness was near total, but I kept moving, lungs burning, heart hammering in my chest. Eventually, the sounds behind me faded. When I stumbled out onto the gravel shoulder of the road, I didn't stop until I saw the faint lights of my parents' house through the trees. We called 911. The next morning, I led a team of officers to where my second campsite had been. The tent, the fire pit, even the marshmallow stick, gone. It was as if I'd never been there. The police didn't find anyone. No tracks, no sign of gear, nothing. I still don't know which is worse, the idea that they were just there to rob me, or the possibility that they were planning something much darker. I never camped in those woods again. I'd always loved hiking into places far from civilization, but this time, I wanted to push it further, to find the most isolated spot possible. A friend had told me about old fire lookout towers that you could rent. Most were built in the mid-1900s, perched on mountaintops with panoramic views, and long since abandoned by forest rangers. I found one online, the most remote I could locate. The listing had almost no information. Just a single old photo, faded and grainy, showing a small square cabin raised maybe 10 feet off the ground. No stilts stretching into the sky, no flashy renovations. Just a weathered wooden box in the clouds. The remoteness was exactly what I wanted. I started the hike at 9 a.m., gear strapped tight to my back. The first few hours were nothing but dense, punishing forest, no views, no sign of human life. The trail itself was barely a trail, just a worn suggestion in the undergrowth. After 5 hours, the trees parted enough for me to see it, the lookout tower, sitting at the crest of a mountain, small against the vast sky. From a distance, it almost looked abandoned. Another hour of climbing and I was there. The view was everything I'd hoped for, mountains rolling into the horizon in every direction. The structure itself had clearly aged, patched in places, but still standing strong. A wraparound staircase led to a narrow deck circling the cabin. Inside, it was bare, no furniture, just weathered floorboards and windows on all sides. It felt raw, untouched. By the time the sun started sinking, I had unpacked, eaten, and sat outside, watching the light fade. When darkness settled over the mountains, I unrolled my sleeping bag on the floorboards and stretched out, tired but content. It must have been 30 or 40 minutes later when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, deliberate, heavy. I froze, staring at the door, a thin panel of wood with no lock. A moment later, a man appeared in the doorway. He was older, maybe late 40s, with shoulder-length blonde hair. His grin was wide, but there was something in it that felt wrong, like it didn't belong on his face. "Great place to stay a few nights, isn't it?" he said, stepping inside without hesitation. "Yeah. I guess so," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. I told him I'd booked it for the next 3 nights. He glanced around. "Actually, I was hoping to be staying here tonight." I hesitated. "Sorry. I've got a friend meeting me soon," I lied. "We've got it booked." The grin stayed a moment longer, then faded. Without another word, he turned and walked out, down the stairs, disappearing into the darkness. Only then did I realize, he had no backpack. No gear. No sign of food or shelter. Nobody hikes that far without supplies. Unless they weren't here to camp. I stayed up a while, keeping watch on the black forest below. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I fell asleep. In the morning, sunlight spilled over the mountains, and for a brief moment, I forgot the night before. I made coffee and stood on the deck, breathing in the thin, cold air. But when I went to descend the stairs, I stopped. At the bottom, pinned to the railing, was a note. One word, "Sorry," followed by a smiley face. My stomach turned. He had come back in the night. While I was sleeping. For the rest of the day, I wandered the slopes below the tower, scanning for any sign of another campsite. I found nothing, no tent, no fire, no path leading away. By nightfall, I told myself I'd be fine. I hung my small battery lantern on the wall, sat inside, and watched the mountains fade into darkness. Midnight crept up before I finally decided to head to bed. I took the lantern and stepped outside to relieve myself near the tree-line. The forest was pitch black, silent. Then, movement. Just a flicker of something shifting in the shadows ahead. I froze, lifted the lantern, but its light only spilled a few feet into the trees. "Hello?" My voice barely carried. Silence. I backed up the stairs, heart pounding. Inside, I hung the lantern and took position by the windows, scanning the forest below. The problem was obvious: the light made me visible, but the forest was an ocean of black. I couldn't see what might be looking back. I focused on the staircase, the one clear vantage point I had. Minutes passed, my pulse slowing slightly. Then I saw him. The man was standing at the base of the stairs. Perfectly still. Not climbing, not leaving, just staring at the steps. His face was shadowed by the railing, but the outline, the height, it was him. 2 full minutes went by before he moved. He stepped backward, paused, then disappeared beneath the deck. I lost sight of him completely. That was enough. My instinct screamed at me to leave. I packed quickly, stopping every half-minute to check the stairs. When my bag was ready, I slung it over my shoulder, crept down, and slipped into the forest, my knife in one hand, lantern in the other. For 5 hours I hiked in near total darkness, every rustle in the trees making my chest tighten. When dawn finally broke and I reached the main road, I didn't look back. Only later did it hit me. I told him I'd be there for 3 nights. He had no reason to come back that second night unless he was planning to return for the third. I didn't want to know what would have happened if I'd been there waiting. The plan was simple: drive from northern Montana all the way to Alaska, living out of my SUV for 2 months. I'd converted the back into a small camping rig, mattress, storage bins, everything I needed. The main draw was the legendary Alaska Highway, a road that wound through the remote western reaches of Canada before crossing into Alaska. I knew it wouldn't be an easy drive. This wasn't the kind of road lined with gas stations and diners. In some stretches, you could go hundreds of miles without seeing another building. That was fine by me. I liked the isolation. The only thing that made me a little uneasy was having to cross into Canada without a firearm. Normally, I kept one tucked under my seat when traveling alone. But here, it wasn't an option. The first day passed without trouble. I drove for 8 hours, taking in sweeping views of mountains and endless forest. This part of the road wasn't too desolate yet. But tomorrow's stretch would be different, a true wilderness run, with long distances between fuel stops. By sundown, I was ready to crash. I spotted a small forest road with a faded sign for camping. No one else was there. Perfect. I parked, put up my window shades, and crawled into the back to sleep. The night was quiet. In the morning, I got out to stretch my legs and noticed a narrow trail disappearing into the trees. I followed it for about 5 minutes until I stumbled upon another campsite. It looked wrong. There was gear scattered everywhere, a sleeping bag half unrolled, a folding chair tipped over, a cooler with its lid hanging open. It didn't look like an animal attack. It looked like whoever had been here left in a hurry. Half their belongings were missing, and the rest were left behind in chaos. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds before my gut told me to leave. When I walked back to my SUV, a black pickup truck had pulled up right next to it. The windows were tinted pitch dark. No one was outside. No engine running. Just there. I didn't like it. I got into my car, started it, and drove away without even pretending to unpack breakfast. 3 or 4 hours later, I pulled into the next gas station. Out here, stopping at every one was non-negotiable. You never passed on a chance to refuel. The place was old, with one pump, and surrounded by mountains. As I filled my tank, I saw a familiar shape coming down the road. The black truck. It pulled into the station, taking the other side of my pump. The driver's window stayed rolled up. No one got out. Of course, maybe it was just coincidence. Out here, there weren't many vehicles on the road. But why had they been at that campsite for only a few minutes before leaving? And why follow the same stops I did? I didn't wait to think about it. As soon as my tank was full, I left. I drove for the rest of the afternoon, pushing deep into the wilderness section of the highway. By the time I found a small hidden pull-off for the night, the sun was dipping low. This one felt safer, tucked into thick brush with no signs of recent use. I debated setting up a tent to stretch out, but something in me said no. Better to stay in the SUV. I cooked dinner outside, enjoying the view of the forest, then climbed back into the car and locked the doors. For hours, I sat there, watching downloaded videos on my phone, feeling almost relaxed. Then, around 11 p.m., I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching on dry leaves and twigs. My phone went dark in my hand. I turned toward the sound, and froze. A man's face was pressed against the side window, staring in. I jolted backward, my breath catching. In the same instant, the face vanished into the dark. From the corner of my eye, movement. Another man, running toward the SUV. The rear window exploded with a sharp crack. Shards of glass sprayed into the car as an arm reached through, fumbling for the door handle. Panic surged through me. My hands shook as I clawed for the keys, jamming them into the ignition. At the same time, the first man appeared at my driver's window, pounding on the glass. The rear door clicked open just as I floored the gas. The SUV lurched forward, gravel spitting from the tires. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of something, the black truck, half hidden in the bushes at the side of the pull-off. They had followed me. All this way. I drove a mile before stopping to slam the rear door shut. My hands were still trembling as I grabbed my phone, trying to call the police. The signal was barely there, dropping in and out, but I managed to get through enough to report the location. By the time officers could have reached the area, they'd be long gone. No license plate. No clear view of their faces. Just two men in the dark, willing to smash their way into a car with someone inside. The next day, I got the window repaired in a small town and pushed on toward Alaska. I forced myself to enjoy the rest of the trip, but the thought stayed with me. What did they want? Out in the middle of nowhere, at night, with no one else around, I didn't want to know.